So I saw a video analysis done of the Eric Garner arrest where the person presenting the video made the argument that it was a lawful arrest, and he gave a very good breakdown for his point of view. But one thing I disagree with is the use of this thing they're calling a neck takedown. Basically, what a neck takedown is, it's a hold around the neck that's not putting on any pressure. It's not constricting. So it's almost like you've got the person in a headlock, but from the back, without squeezing. So your arm is around the neck of the person, and without putting pressure on the neck, use that arm around the person's. It's around the neck, but it's not squeezing on the neck. And you use that to help push, pull, or guide the person to the ground. This was being used instead of what New York City Police Department was calling a chokehold. And in the video it talks about they have two types of chokeholds. They have the carotid chokehold, which is what we teach in judo, and the respiratory chokehold, which in judo we call it air choke, which is forbidden from competition. See, the logic of that video, and if this is what the New York Police Department is thinking, their logic is twisted and wrong. Okay, and I'm not just saying this to insult them. It's not my intention to insult them. My intention is to offer a solution after all of my ranting here. Okay. See, in judo, they believe that the carotid choke hold is actually safer than what they're calling the air choke or respiratory choke hold, because you cut off blood to the brain for a second, and the person goes out quickly. You can quickly release it, and the person can be revived fairly quickly with minimal damage done. Plus, it happens very fast. A good judo choke can make a person pass out in about 6 seconds. All of the proper judo chokes are done on the side of the neck, and they're approved in competition. They can be done in the high stress of a competition without any injury to someone. This, in my opinion, is one of the rare instances where sport actually trumps, quote unquote, self-defense or combative encounters. Because if you actually take that sport technique and apply it quasi-combative or apply it combatively, if you did it the sport way, it would actually be better for the person that's receiving the technique. With this thing called a neck takedown, where you're using an arm around the neck to pull the person down, to me it's two things. Number one, I don't see how, under the stress and adrenaline rush of making an arrest, how that would not turn into some kind of chokehold. Because the minute that the person who's got the arm around the suspect's neck gets tense or gets a little mad, it's like, no, I'm tired of this person resisting me, they're going to tense up. When they tense up, they're probably going to squeeze more. And if they squeeze, that's going to put pressure on the person's neck. What they should be doing is trying to avoid or minimize pressure to the neck as much as possible. So you can't put your arm around the neck. You can't just put your arm around a person's neck and not think that there's not going to be somebody that's going to squeeze. Number two, with the way Eric Garner's body rocked forward and then back in the video, you can't tell me it's not possible for there to have been damage to his windpipe, especially with his weight. Because if somebody goes forward, if they move forward and then you yank them back to get them on their back or to get them down like that, especially as bony as an arm can be, you stand a good chance of damaging somebody's windpipe. That's why we don't allow that choke in judo. We don't allow air chokes. You're supposed to do things on the side of the neck. So right there, putting it on somebody, putting the arm by itself around somebody's neck in the midst of trying to make an arrest, that's in and of itself is something that can convert to a chokehold. And then if the person that you're arresting the suspect moves forward and then back, if they move more than one direction, you run the risk of doing some kind of damage or pressure on their windpipe. So that's going to automatically take this neck takedown and turn it into a chokehold by default. Oh, and the third thing is, if you look at the video footage of the the officer that's on top of Eric Garner, at one point his shoulder is in the back of Eric Garner's head. So with his shoulder being up against Eric Garner's head, that's an element of a chokehold. That automatically right there is going to make it mutate from neck takedown in a chokehold, whether it was done intentionally or not. It may not have been done intentionally, but you just, on all that stress and pressure, all those people moving Eric Garner in different directions, to me, it's impossible for a neck takedown to not turn into a chokehold. Especially if it was first learned by the officer as a chokehold. Because if the officer's primary introduction to that type of motion was as a choke, and then he's got to go back later and modify it to be a neck takedown, when he gets under the stress of an adrenaline encounter, he's probably going to revert back to what he learned first. And that's not just my theory. There's a whole bunch of theory in there that things learned under adrenaline or what we end up doing. You know, I've got an aside for that in my own experience real quick. I remember I had to take an adrenaline shot. So I took the EpiPen and I took the adrenaline shot, right? And the adrenaline was in me for a long time. So I went home, doctor's fine, everything's fine, right? So you're okay, go home. So, you know, you might want to do something to burn that adrenaline off too. That'll probably help you, you know, by the time it's time to go to bed, you can go to sleep. And so when I went back to the house, it's funny. I said, I just wanted to see what I would do. I said, okay, I'm going to do a form. Because I've seen so much this stuff about how, oh, you can't use your martial art techniques under adrenaline, right? So I said, I'm just going to do a form. Let me do the first form that comes to mind. The first form I did when I had that adrenaline shot was the first form I learned. The first form I learned was an intermediate level form because I'd come over from Taekwondo to Tang Sudo. So I did Pinan Nidan, or Pinan Nidan is really, that's what he called it. First he let me learn Pinan Nidan, and then I went back and he said, no, I'm going to make you start over. So the first form I did when I had adrenaline shot into me, running through my body, was Pinan Nidan. You know what makes it even funnier? Is I had not practiced Pinan Nidan for years. I'm talking years. I didn't even think I remembered it. Matter of fact, if you consciously asked me to do Pinan Nidan, I may have trouble doing it. But I bet if it was under adrenaline, I could do it. So, we're going to revert back to what we learned under adrenaline a lot of times. Because it's ingrained. So, if that motion for that officer was ingrained as a choke, it's going to come back out as a choke. So you can't, if the New York Police Department wants to ban chokeholds, they have to ban chokeholds and neck takedowns because the neck takedown is going to mutate into a choke. It just is. It's going to become a choke whether you want it to or not. So what would be a solution? Because everybody says you can't just point out the problems, you have to offer solutions. Well, my solution is, if you're going to borrow so much from martial arts, which law enforcement agencies do, borrow all the way. Now, by that, I mean, judo's solution is to require the players to, when they're doing a neck, if they're doing any type of rear naked choke, at least for demonstration, you have to have an arm inside that choke. That's how it was when I was competing. Meaning, instead of just doing a choke on the neck, you have to go under the person's arm and lift it up and then go around the side of the neck, so that when you're applying the pressure, the neck has the person's arm up against the head. Their arm is up against the head and it's the neck. Their arm is lending support to the neck. You can still choke somebody out with it, but all of the pressure is not on the neck. You have the upper arm and shoulder too, taking away a lot of the pressure off the neck. And that is about, I find that's the safest way to practice that choke. I mean, it's a little inconvenient, granted, but it is a safe way to practice a choke. Okay? Especially when you have people who, their control is not the greatest. It's probably best to teach them to do it that way. Now, if I work out with people that I can trust, I don't have to worry if somebody I trust can do a neck choke on me, can do a rear naked choke, or even what they call the neck crank. If they got control and they get me in it, I don't have to worry, because I know that they're not going to try to break my neck. But see, some of these people that have been dabbling in jiu-jitsu, and it's not, and let me make it clear, it is not the style. It's not the style. I'll even go so far as say that it's not the coach, because I doubt that the coach is teaching them to do it that way. It's them with their desire to win. See, when people get some kind of chokehold on someone and they just so pressed to win, they start cranking and cranking on a person's neck like they're in the middle of a war zone. If I'm in the middle of a war zone and the enemy is coming at me from the bush or from behind the building, or, from over the sand dune, or from out of the ocean, or whatever, if I'm fighting the enemy and I'm trying to kill the enemy, yeah, I'm going to crank that thing like I'm trying to pull their neck out of their socket. But I shouldn't be thinking of people that I'm arresting as the enemy. Especially if I'm a police officer. I should not be thinking that they're the enemy. They're not the enemy. They are the suspect. You shouldn't be thinking of yourself as being at war with them, even if they're trying to hurt you. No, it's easy for me to say this because I'm not a cop, but it doesn't mean that I'm not right. You shouldn't really think of them as the enemy. You should think of them as, that's somebody's threat. I have to stop their force. You should be trying to bring them back. Think of it as they're in motion and I'm trying to stop the motion. I'm trying to bring them to a state of rest and not rest in peace. You're just trying to rectify the situation. You shouldn't be trying to kill the person. And to bring this back to a martial arts perspective, when you're competing with someone, you shouldn't be trying to kill them or maim them. You really are not supposed to try to hurt them in the martial arts. You're supposed to try to show more skill than they do. That's why we have the stop here, we have the tap outs in martial arts. And even in combat sport, where people can be knocked out and you can use full force, there are still a limit to what you can do. There are techniques that are allowed and there are techniques that are not allowed. Even in the almighty cage, you're not allowed to kick people in the groin or eye gouge them or hit them in the area they call the crown of the head, right? If somebody taps out, you're not supposed to keep going. It's not a war. It's not a war. And that's the big problem. See, and I'm going to talk about my gender here. And no, I'm not a feminist. But when you get dudes in any kind of scuffle or conflict, a lot of times we'll turn anything into a competition. So arresting someone, I can see how that could turn into a competition. Because if I try to arrest you, I'm a cop and I arrest you, I win. If I'm a crook and you try to arrest me and I get away, I win. So officers trying to win, felon, crook, Well, suspect's trying to win. Next thing you know, somebody's going to lose, and they're going to lose big. Right? Somebody's going to get shot. Somebody's going to get killed. Somebody's going to get blunt force trauma to the point where they're going to end up in the hospital. So at a minimum, somebody's going to see a medic because people try to one-up each other. What are you talking about? You got a bunch of testosterone flying around. Doesn't even have to be men, really. It could be a female officer trying to arrest a female suspect or a male suspect. It starts turning into a game, but not a gentle game, a game with deadly consequences. There's going to be a loser. And that's why I won't completely put down the video that inspired my video. Because whether we like it or not, I like what they said at the end of the video. The moral of the story, folks, is if the cops come to arrest you, you should just comply. I mean, unless you know for a fact you're dealing with people you're dealing with a set of police officers who are actually trying to murder you, which in 99.99% of the times is actually not the case. That would have to be some type of thing where you're probably involved in something and they're involved in something that neither one of y'all should be in. So that's really a non-issue. You know, if they're trying to arrest you, just go. Go. You can always come back and sue them. You can sue them for wrongful arrest. If they're arresting you and you don't resist and they still do something to you, you can sue them. Come back and sue them. You know, come back and fight in the courtroom with a lawyer where they will pay and be brought to justice if they're wrong. But you know, especially if you know you wrong, man, and they're coming to arrest you, just go. Heck, they still may not be able to make the arrest stick because they just may not have enough evidence to make it good. Or you may have a lawyer that could teach you how to get out of it, that could, help you get out of the charge. I know it's cool to be anti-authority nowadays. And I'm not saying that I'm a perfect person. But they're the cops. Whether you like the police or not, they are allowed to use force against you. So why fight them? Whenever I've been pulled over by the cops, I follow those Chris Rock tips. And I'm a big black guy. I've had a gun drawn on me before. They come up, I try to be the calm one in the situation because somebody's got to be rational. And in the eyes of some people, my being rational will make them feel like I am less of a man. But you know what? The people who depend on me being alive are glad that I am not only a man, but that I am alive. Peace.